Wade back here with you, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. And today I'm going to start a new series. Not sure how many videos this is going to take to complete, but we're going to start with number 1 today, and it's building a set of leather suspenders. So today we're going to design, make a pattern for the back patch, and then we'll move on from there. So come on in and let's get started. Alright, so I've got a small piece of poster board here that is 4 inches by 5 inches, and that's what we're going to start out with to make this pattern. I've got a piece of approximately 10 ounce leather veg tan that we're going to use to make this back patch for these leather suspenders. And then I've got these rectangled rings. This is the size that I'm going to use for all the hardware. So that's going to that's inside width is 1 inch. So my straps and everything are going to be 1 inch wide, maybe just a hair less than 1 inch, but right at it. We'll find that out when we get to that point. But on this, I want to design a back patch that I don't want it just square or just a shield look to it. I want to make it somewhat different. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my painter's tape. Hopefully this will work. And I'm just going to put a little piece on each corner. This is probably a little overkill. I could probably do 2 corners, but I don't want it to move while I'm doing my design work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pencil, and this pencil, I've used the eraser completely off of it, so I'll get me another one. I just keep tons of these little number 2 pencils laying around. So I've got my poster board for my pattern here, and I've never done this before, so this 4 by 5 inch piece of poster board is just arbitrary. I didn't look it up or try to find any dimensions or anything to start with, or see how to make one or anything. I just want to wing it, do it myself, and see what happens, see how it turns out. I do want these to be adjustable, so that's something we're going to have to work into this project. So again, as I said in the beginning, I'm not sure, I'm not positive how many parts this is going to be to actually complete this whole project, but I think with it being my first set of suspenders, that if I tried to make it all one video, this thing is going to be super long, and it's going to take a long time to put this together. Now, once I make this set and I learn from my mistakes, then I'm sure that I could do another set fairly reasonably quick. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to find the center of my pattern piece. So half of 4 is 2 inches. So I'll mark that. Half of 5 is 2.5 inches. So I'll mark that. So I've got my center now. I just have a little cross there that shows my center. Then what I want to do is I think I want to try to make it overall 4 inches tall, or vertically. So let's put 2 inches on that center mark again, and let's mark it at 0 and 4 inches. And then if that's 4, let's do 3 inches this way. So half of 3 is 1.5. We'll put 1.5 on the center mark, mark it at 0, mark it at 3 inches. So that gives me my outside total dimensions. And I've got this set up on my grid on my cutting mat, my self-healing mat. So if I come in 1/2 inch on each side, that should be where I need to be. Because I want this nice and square. So I'll draw those lines. And there's my inside, or actually it'll be my outside dimensions. Let me pick this up and show you what I've got so far. Fairly simple. You can see my center mark and then my outside dimensions that I'm going to use. Now I can go ahead and start figuring out how I want this designed. I think what I'll do is I want to angle these off so that I can have each one going over my shoulder at the top. Then at the bottom I'm going to use one strap that comes down. That's the way I'm going to try it. So I don't want this going at a straight angle, or it's not going to want to go over my shoulders. It's going to want to pull out away from my shoulders to the outside. So instead of coming over like 1 inch and down 1 inch, which would make it go that direction toward the outside of my shoulder, I need to maybe come over 1 inch. And let's look. If we come over 1 inch on each side and down from the top 1/2 inch on each side, what that does is it changes that angle to where it's not so sharp going out, it's going more up. So let me draw those lines. Again, that's why I'm using a pencil, in case I need to make some corrections. Let's draw those points. And let's kind of get a view of what that is going to look like. And again, it's not that I want it straight cut off. I just want to see what the angle is going to look like. And it looks like it's probably going to be pretty good, so it's not so harsh angled. And then on the bottom, if we mark the center point And remember, I'm going to use 1-inch straps, so it has to be wider at the bottom than 1 inch. So I believe I'll go 1.5, which would be 3/4 on each side of center. And then I can go up let's try 2 inches. And again, I'm winging this. I have no idea. I just kind of have a vision in my head of how I want this to look. So what I need to do is try to get me some type of curved pattern. Now you could use French curves, and I've got a bunch of those. You could use things like this that I just saved that have different types of curves in them. I think I might want. I'm going to go ahead and try this and see what it looks like. I'm not sure if I want that. We'll try it. We'll draw it on there. And what I'll probably want to do is come back and round this corner so we don't have just a sharp edge anywhere other than at the end, and I'm not even sure if I want a sharp edge there. So let's go from the edge where that drew that point and mark it at a 1/2 inch on each side away from the edge. And that's where we'll start curving it back the other direction. And let's see what that does. We make that curve that way. I like that. That looks pretty good. I'll show you that here in just a second. And again, this is just kind of what I have in my mind. And here's what I've got so far. And you can see I'm starting to get this flow around here to where it's not just straight angles. So I've got some curves in it. I'm liking it so far. I think I'm going to round these corners off at the bottom, and I'm not going to round them off a lot. I'm just going to take the sharp point off of them, and I'll show you what I did there. So I used that again just to take that point off and round that edge. And I've got these rounded. Now all I have to do is figure out the top. I don't want that to be perfectly square either. So I think I'll set that where it dips down. Like that, so it actually comes down and with an arc. And then can round those corners off the same way I did at the bottom. I'm trying to stay away from as if you can't tell, I'm trying to stay away from those pointed corners. I'm not real crazy about that. I want it to look like it flows and it's smooth. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to do the same thing on the edge over here. Just enough to knock those edges off. And what I'll do is I'll cut this pattern out to show you the difference. I'll cut it out with the hard edges, the hard corners first. Then I'll finish it with the round edges and show you the difference. So here's what I come up with. Here's what I've got so far. So let's take this off. So far I'm pretty happy with that. And again, it's the first time I've ever done this, so I've got a vision in my head, and I want to try to get it down on paper first before I go cutting on any leather or anything. Let's grab a pair of shears, scissors, and I'm going to cut this out again with the hard edges to give you an idea what it would look like. And it's you got a nice pair of shears. Sure makes it easy cutting this poster board. So far it looks good. Now see how everything's got a hard point or a hard edge on it, corner? That's what using those just small little arcs or rounding those corners off just a little bit. I'll show you the difference. And it's going to be very subtle. But enough, even though the corners are going to be really subtly rounded or very small rounded corners, it's going to make a huge difference in the look. And obviously I want to take my time. I don't want to make a mistake and have to start over on my pattern. And these real small ones on the bottom are the most difficult, but I don't want to cut too big a corner around. I don't want to round too big there because I need that space for when I put my strap in there. Alright, so there's what we end up with. So instead of those hard points on all the edges, now they're just radiused enough to where it looks smooth. So let's move the scrap out of the way. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back up here. Yes, I'm going to tape it back down because I want to get my slots for my rings, my rectangle rings that I'm going to use for my straps. I want to make sure I get those perfect. So I want them in my pattern perfect. So when I transfer it to my leather, I know it's going to be precise. So let me hang up these shears out of my way, and let's go ahead and I'm going to come down. I want plenty of meat on that to hold the straps that's going to go through there. So I'm going to come down 1/4 inch from that edge, that corner. That's where I'm going to start my slot for my straps. I'm going to draw that line across that corner on both sides, and then I want to keep it symmetrical, so I'm going to do the same at the bottom. So I'll come up 1/4 inch from the bottom and make my line across there. Now, my strap is, I'm going to use the same thickness of leather, so it's going to be pretty thick leather, just be pretty heavy duty. So I'm going to use my slotted punch, which is, I'll measure that, it's 1/2 inch, so I'll have to do it 2 times side by side, which should be fine. But I need to see what the thickness of that's going to be, and it looks like it's right at 1/8 of an inch thick. Let's see what our leather is, and it's right at 1/8 of an inch, so it should work out really well. So I want 1 inch across. So again, if that's 1.5 inches, I'll go 3/4 for my center mark. And if it's 1 inch across, I'll go 1/2 from center and 1 inch. So I'll do the same thing at the top because I want those centered. That's 1 1/4 at the top across. So that would be 5/8 would be the center. And then 0 and 1 inch. I'll do the same on this side. And then I'll go 1/8 of an inch down. And again, this is my pattern, so I can tweak it if I need to. I could go ahead and make those marks, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm finished here. And I do have a 1/4 inch here, but on the corners, well, it's going to be right at a 1/4 inch. So I think it's going to be okay. So I'll show you what I have. So there's where my slots are going to be placed for my straps. And I think what I'll do is I'll take my poly cutting board and I'll stick with the line for sure that's the furthest away from the edge, just so I know I've got plenty of room. And go ahead and use my slotted punch on my pattern. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I do have my rounded corners. And then I'm going to measure that once I cut my slots in there. I want to measure that and see how much room I have in those corners. So I'll pop that out of there. There's my slots for my pattern that I'll transfer to my leather. And then if I measure those corners, yeah, I have right at a 1/4 inch, 3/16 to a 1/4 inch. So that'll work. At least I think it will, because that leather's so thick, you're not going to have a ton of pressure on that. So I think that's going to work pretty well. So there's my pattern. I better mark it. And I'll mark that as back patch suspenders. That way, once it gets mixed in with a million other patterns, I'll know exactly what that is when I go looking for it. So now I can transfer that to my leather, and I think I will just see if I can use my pencil. I normally use a pen, but I'll stick with this pencil and see how it does. I like using the pen because the line thickness doesn't ever change. And as your lead gets worn down, your line thickness changes with a pencil. Then I'll do the outside, then I'll mark the slots that I just put in my pattern with my slotted punch. And you can see that. I don't know if you can see it on camera. Yeah, you can see it. But it transferred fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do my slots first. I want to make sure that when I'm doing this, that it's exactly where I want it before I go hitting on it, because that could cause some problems. Have to start over. Don't want to do that. Looks like I need to clean my slotted punch out. Alright, so there's my slots in my leather. It looks like a sad face. And then I can take my knife. I want to make sure I have a good sharp blade in there. So I'm going to spin this around. I know this end's sharp. To cut this out. And I'm going to cut the straight cut first. And kind of get that out of my way. And we'll do the same on the sides. And then I'll come back and start cutting on the radiuses. It doesn't hurt if you need to. Definitely doesn't hurt to use a straight edge. So instead of trying to cut around and freehand all those radiuses on there, because there's some inside and outside radiuses on this, it'd just be, for me, much easier to go ahead and cut all the straight edges just like I did on the pattern, and then come back and cut the small radiuses using multiple cuts. So for instance, I'll go ahead and cut this one, and again, that's why you have to have such a sharp knife. A dull knife will really make your radiuses unsmooth. A sharp knife makes them real nice and smooth. So you'll notice I'm not bearing down on that. I'm not trying to cut through that on my first cut. I'm just following the line so I get it right perfectly on that line the first time through. Taking my time, not bearing down hard at all. And then the second time with that nice sharp blade, still don't have to bear down very hard, and it'll go right through it. One little spot there. There we go. So there's the piece without the radiuses. So now I can go back. Now remember, these radiuses were super small. They weren't real big. And I'll make multiple cuts around that, taking very little material. And I'm just doing like I did on my pattern. I'm just softening those corners up. So I'm taking very, very small amounts of material off of there just to get that hard corner off. And again, this helps if you have a nice sharp blade in your knife. You can see those little small pieces I'm taking off of there. Not very big at all. As I work my way around that corner. It's so much easier to do it this way for me than to try to cut around a little tiny small radius of corner. It's just difficult. The smaller, to me, the smaller it is, the more difficult it is to cut. So there it is with the radiuses cut. You wouldn't think that small of an amount would make that big a deal or big a difference, but it does. It makes it nice and rounded and smooth. There's one little spot there. That I need to get. And again, it doesn't take very, very little amount to make a difference. So you can always go back, clean it up a little bit if you want. The reason why I like to take such small amounts too is you can't add anything back to it. You know, if you cut too much off, you got to start over. So you can always go back and cut more off to sharpen those up. So that's what I did on this, was clean that up just a little bit more. The rest of them look good. I'm happy with them. So there's my back patch for the start of my suspender project. Now, one thing that I am going to do to this is I'm going to put my maker's mark in here. So I'll have to get that set up and I'll show you how I'll do that. So I'll be right back. Alright, so I'm going to case this back patch of leather here with some water. Just lightly. Before I put my maker's mark in there. Again, I ordered this off, I believe it was on Amazon. May not have been, but I think it was. And it's just a hard plastic, and it comes mounted on this plywood. And I've used it many times, and it still does a really good job. So, and it wasn't very expensive at all. I think it was under 20 bucks. So I've got my leather cased, ready to go. I've got my boards stacked up here, and this is just some little press that I found at a Goodwill store, believe it or not. And it does a good job. I'd rather have like a nice arbor press, and eventually I'll probably get one, but this does a real nice job. You just have to stack. It's got a real short throw on it, so you just have to stack up. I use 1-bys or some leather scrap or whatever I need to get it up to where it needs to be, so that when I go to press on it, I get a good impression. And I do make sure that my leather that I'm putting my maker's mark in is between these 2 1/4-inch pieces of steel, so I get a good firm press on it. and it distributes the weight really well. And I don't have this mounted down. You can mount it down. It's got holes to mount it down, but I just push it down as far as it'll go, hold it there for a couple of seconds, lift the pressure off, and I can slide the whole thing out. And you can see it does a really nice job of putting my maker's mark in there. And like I said, I think that was less than $20. So not a big investment to do your maker's mark. And you could probably, I've done it before, you can strike it with a hammer too if you need to. It's going to wear on the wood a lot more if you do that. But if you had to, you could do that to get by until you found a press of some type to press that in there. Alright, so there's step one in the process of making these custom-made suspenders out of leather. I've got the back patch done from the design all the way to the finished product as far as the back patch goes. So my lower in the back will come down, my strap will come down out of this and go to the back of my pants, and then these two straps will go over my shoulders into the front. So this is what's going to hold all that together. And I'll have to figure out what type of dye I want to use, what color I want these when we're done. So I appreciate you coming along. Appreciate you following, watching, and please, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it. Like I always say, please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.